Hello, everyone online. So this is from our beloved teacher, Luangpor Viradhammo. It's the introduction to the book called The Island, which was co-authored by Luangpor Viradhammo and Luangpor Amaro many years ago. And The Island is quite a thick compilation of different aspects of the concept of Nibbana, both from Theravada and other schools of Buddhism. So this is Luangpor's introduction to that. Let me read. A difficulty with the word Nibbana is that its meaning is beyond the power of words to describe. It is essentially undefinable. Another difficulty is that many Buddhists see Nibbana as something unobtainable, as so high and so remote that we're not worthy enough to try for it. True? That's quite common, I think. Or we see Nibbana as a goal, as an unknown, undefined something that we should somehow try to attain. Most of us are conditioned in this way. We want to achieve or attain something that we don't have now. So Nibbana is looked at as something that, if you work hard, keep the sila, meditate diligently, become a monastic, devote your life to practice, then your reward might be that eventually you attain Nibbana, even though you're not sure what that is. Ajahn Chah would use the words, the reality of non-grasping, as the definition for Nibbana, realizing the reality of non-grasping. That helps to put it in a context, because the emphasis is on awakening to how we grasp and hold on even to words like Nibbana or Buddhism or practice or sila or whatever. It's often said that the Buddhist way is not to grasp, but that can become just another statement that we grasp and hold on to. It's a catch-22. No matter how hard you try to make sense out of it, you end up in total confusion because of the limitation of language and perception. You have to go beyond language and perception. And the only way to go beyond thinking and emotional habit is through awareness of them, through awareness of thought, through awareness of emotion. The island that you cannot go beyond is the metaphor for this state of being awake and aware, as opposed to the concept of becoming awake and aware. Say that again. The island that you cannot go beyond is the metaphor for the state of being awake and aware, as opposed to the concept of becoming awake and aware. In meditation classes, people often start with a basic delusion that they never challenge. The idea that I'm someone who grasps and has a lot of desires, and I have to practice in order to get rid of these desires and to stop grasping and clinging to these things. I shouldn't cling to anything. That's often the position we start from. So we start our practice from this basis, and many times the result is disillusionment and disappointment because our practice is based on the grasping of an idea. Eventually, we realize that no matter how much we try to get rid of desire and not grasp anything, no matter what we do, become a monk, an ascetic, sit for hours and hours, attend retreats over and over again, do all the things we believe will get rid of these grasping tendencies, we end up feeling disappointed because the basic delusion has never been recognized. This is why the metaphor of the island that you cannot go beyond is so very powerful, because it points to the principle of an awareness that you can't get beyond. It's very simple, very direct, and you can't conceive it. You have to trust it. You have to trust the simple ability that we all have to be fully present and fully awake, and begin to recognize the grasping and the ideas we have taken on about ourselves, about the world around us, about our thoughts and perceptions and feelings. The way of mindfulness is the way of recognizing conditions just as they are. We simply recognize and acknowledge their presence without blaming them or judging them or criticizing them or praising them. We allow them to be, the positive and the negative both. And as we trust in this way of mindfulness more and more, we begin to realize the reality of the island that you cannot go beyond. When I started practicing meditation, I felt I was somebody who was very confused, and I wanted to get out of this confusion and get rid of my problems and become someone who was not confused, someone who was a clear thinker, someone who would be maybe one day become enlightened. That was the impetus that got me going in the direction of Buddhist meditation and monastic life. But then, by reflecting on this position that I am somebody who needs to do something, I began to see it as a created condition. It was an assumption that I had created. And if I operated from that assumption, then I might develop all kinds of skills and live a life that was praiseworthy and good and beneficial to myself and to others. But at the end of the day, I might feel quite disappointed that I did not attain the goal of Nibbana. Fortunately, the whole direction of monastic life is one where everything is directed at the present. You're always learning to challenge and to see through your assumptions about yourself. One of the major challenges is the assumption that I am somebody who needs to do something in order to become enlightened in the future. Just by recognizing this as an assumption I had created, that which is aware knows it is something created out of ignorance, out of not understanding. When we see and recognize this fully, then we stop creating the assumptions. Awareness is not about making value judgments about our thoughts or emotions or actions or speech. Awareness is about knowing these things fully. They are what they are at this moment. So what I found very helpful was learning to be aware of conditions without judging them. In this way, the resultant karma of past actions and speech as it arises in the present is fully recognized without compounding it, without making it into a problem. It is what it is. What arises ceases. As we recognize that and allow things to cease according to their nature, the realization of cessation gives us an increasing amount of faith in the practice of non-attachment and letting go. The attachments that we have, even to good things like Buddhism, can also be seen as attachments that blind us. That doesn't mean we need to get rid of Buddhism. We merely recognize attachment as attachment and that we created ourselves out of ignorance. And as we keep reflecting on this, the tendency toward attachment falls away. And the reality of non-attachment, of non-grasping, reveals itself in what we can say is Nibbana. If we look at it in this way, Nibbana is here and now. It's not an attainment in the future. The reality is here and now. It is so very simple, but beyond description. It can't be bestowed or even conveyed. It can only be known by each person for themselves. As one begins to realize or to recognize non-grasping as the way, then emotionally one can feel quite frightened by it. It can seem like a kind of annihilation is taking place. All that I think that I am in the world and all that I regard as stable and real starts falling apart. and it can be frightening. But if we have the faith to continue bearing with these emotional reactions and allow things that arise to cease, to appear and disappear according to the nature, then we find our stability not in achievement or in attaining, but in being awake, being aware. I skip a little bit. And then this is from the Sutta Nipata in the Samyutta Nikaya. Next was the Brahmin student Kappa. Sir, so Kappa speaking to the Lord Buddha. Sir, he said, there are people stuck midstream in the terror and the fear of the rush of the river of being, and death and decay overwhelm them. For their sake, sir, tell me where to find an island. Tell me where there is solid ground beyond the reach of all this pain. Kappa, said the master, for the sake of those people stuck in the middle of the river of being, overwhelmed by death and decay, I will tell you where to find solid ground. There is an island which you cannot go beyond. It is a place of nothingness, a place of non-possession and of non-attachment. It is the total end of death and decay, and this is why I call it Nibbana, the extinguished, the cool. There are people who in mindfulness have realized this and are completely cooled here and now. They do not become slaves working for Mara, for death. They cannot fall into his power. That's from the Samyutta Nikaya. In English, nothingness can sound like annihilation, like nihilism, but you can also emphasize the thingness so that it becomes no thingness. So Nibbana is not a thing that you can find. It is the place of no thingness, a place of non-possession, a place of non-attachment. It is a place, as Ajahn Chah said, where you experience the reality of non-grasping. For your reflection. Yeah, so I guess we'll give the link later. But for those of you watching, if you go to the Amaravati website, look for the book The Island, authored by Ajahn Pavaro and Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Amaro. And in the intro, you'll find that piece. Okay. And my homework now is to do a guided meditation. So let's meditate. This piece that I read earlier in the morning, it's contemplative reading. Like contemplative reading is not. Go ahead, you can switch it off. Yeah, contemplative. I won't disappear. Contemplative reading is different than information reading. You know, if you were going to do if you're doing a high school examination about the Four Noble Truths, you read it, you see, okay, dukkha means this, samudaya means this, nirodha means this, magga means this. You memorize it, you get an A. So what? You still suffer. Whereas contemplative reading, especially that piece I read this morning, is quite enigmatic. There's a lot of things there that may puzzle your mind, which is a good thing because you question and you look, what's he mean by that? So it's not you figure it out intellectually, you kind of figure it out experientially. This language, no thingness, non-possession, you know, what does that actually mean? So very often you have to read those things every day for 10 weeks. You know, just keep looking at it and then one little bit strikes you. Oh, I get it. Yeah. So it's a whole different and academic reading, what would academic reading be? Well, you'd get the original Chinese from that morning piece. You'd figure out what script they were using in 800 AD. You'd get some old rendition of it. You get a modern rendition in the Chinese. You'd argue about what is the Chinese. Then you would get a Thai version. Then you'd argue about the words in Thai. And then you get a Farang version, an English version. And then you'd argue about that. And you still wouldn't know. Because all you'd be talking in comparisons, but not really contemplating it. So academics, they're important people, but academic knowledge is different than experiential knowledge. It's like maybe dentistry. If you get an academic who talks about dental work, it's different than a dentist working on your teeth. It's kind of hands-on and working. In the same way, the contemplative life is a hands-on looking at the way things are. How does it work? How does conscious like my question, why beauty? Why can we experience, that kind of inner looking? And these texts, or the way Luangpor says, or the Shin Ming are, to me, very actually very energizing, because they get me to start looking at my own practice and see, well, do I understand it? Or what's he pointing to? As opposed to just a list. The lists are okay. They can be interesting and helpful for reflection. So with that, this piece or the one this morning, like, let's see how much you understood by next year. All right, maybe we'll have a test. Let's meditate. Lights. Awakening to the way things are. So just that simple knowing, being aware, how is it for you now? And you're not looking for a definition of how it is now. It's just attentive, silent knowing, and then waiting. So this is awareness. This is natural. You're not making anything out of it. And this is the refuge, and this is the practice. Then play around with that. So listen to sound. There's awareness, sound, and any words you put on it. It's a loud sound, or I am listening. These are not the reality. The reality is before you think about it. It's like this. And then wait. And then you might contemplate body awareness. So sound, now body sensation, allowing that to manifest in consciousness. Body feels like this. But before you say it's my head or my foot, before you say anything, what's it like? And this is nature, body. Before thinking, before judgment, it's like this. So you could use the breath. So say, make conscious breathing. And then awakeness for a whole in breath and a whole out breath. So the mind remains open, attentive. So in awareness or awakeness meditation, you're constantly just remembering the same thing. And then the thinking mind, when you notice it, just awaken. Oh, thought feels like this. So set up your meditation with awareness and then use whatever comes intuitively to you. But the most important thing is the awake, aware presence of knowing.